Welcome back to the Dale Wiley Show, and I hope you enjoy part 2 of my interview with Scott Kempner. So how did you end up becoming friends with Springsteen? He was a Dictators fan, right?
Unbelievable. That's unbelievable. The story with Bruce goes, I had sort of written him off without ever hearing him. I remember the ads for the first record, and he was being touted as a new Dylan, you know? And I think back and I go, that was what, like 1974? And I'm thinking,
yeah.
Dylan was 30 years old. We were done with him at that point. That was it. 30 years old. You're over. Sorry, Bobby. You know. And so I ignored him. The ads for the first album all contained the first batch of lyrics from "Blinded by the Light," "Madman Drummers," "Bummers," "Indians in the Summer." So I could easily see what they were talking about with the Dylan thing, but I just totally wrote him off with that. And then after a Dictators rehearsal, we were all standing about midnight. We were all standing around bullshitting before we went our separate ways. And Andy, sure enough, says to me, I just heard that new Bruce Springsteen record. And I went, oh, yeah, really? Expecting him to tell me, don't worry about it. It's a piece of crap. You're not going to want to bother with it. But Andy said, I think you got to hear it. And so I went to the label. Again, he was on CBS. We were on CBS. I got a copy of it. And I know it's a cliche and you hear this a lot, but it changed my life.
Sure.
It changed my life. By the end of side 2, I was in a combination of the shock of the new with the shock of the familiar. Like, how come there was never been a rock star like this? How come there was never somebody who could combine these elements? It was like the guy broke into my house while I was gone, analyzed all my albums, and came up with that. You know, that was what it felt like. And so a few months later, our brother band, the Blue Oyster Cult, were tapped to open for the Faces in New York on the Faces farewell tour. At that point, the Blue Oyster Cult were already a headlining band in New York. They were a major band, and they didn't like the idea of having to open to anybody. Right? It pissed them off that they were opening. So CBS threw them this big, lavish party backstage or up in one of the party places inside Madison Square Garden itself. And again, I'm on the label. Bruce is on the label. We were both there. Knew there'd be a lot of free food, and what the hell? I did the Faces, so I might figure this would be good. So I'm walking around in there, and there's all these people from the label dressed really well, and there's all this great food, and people are drinking and eating and having a good time. And I'm walking around like Mama Luke of the Year, 3 years running. Nobody wants to talk to me. Nobody gives a shit who I am. And I'm walking around, and all of a sudden I see this guy sitting by himself at a table, and I go, oh, wow, that's that guy. That's that Bruce Springsteen guy. Excuse me. And so I went over to him. I said, hey, Bruce, my name is Scott, and I'm in a band on a label. I play with this band, the Dictators. He went, the Dictators? You are kidding me. I went, no. I go, he knew every second of that first Dictators record. All of Manitoba's in between song rants, all of the songs. He had been to see the man with Stevie at the Stevie Van Zandt at the Bottom Line in New York, and he knew it all. He said, oh, me and Clarence, we act out all those things. It was, and I was like, I tell him, Bruce, I just wanted to tell you, I heard your records, and I really think it's like the greatest thing I've ever heard in my life. And we just became instant friends, and that went on for quite a while. I saw him again. My girlfriend at the time was working at the box office of the Carnegie Hall Cinema in New York, which was part of Carnegie Hall around the corner, and was one of the first theaters to show like two different classic movies every day. And often I would go pick her up at the box office on the way home, and we'd go back to the Bronx together. And one night, another cold winter night. We're in the box office. I'm standing in this little box office with her because she's got a heater, one of those portable heaters. And I see online outside this guy in a jacket and a baseball hat. And I'm looking and go, hey, Pam, that's that guy. That's Bruce Springsteen. And she goes, well, tell him to come in. I'll get him in for free. So I said, hey, Bruce. And he always called me Top 10. Always, right? He loved calling me Top 10. And he goes, hey, Top 10, how you doing? I said, oh, good. Listen, my girlfriend, this is my girlfriend, Pam. She says she can get you into this for free. And he was like really grateful. Like a guy for whom the $8 it was going to cost him to get in, it was a really big deal, at that point.
Yeah.
And it was the first time I ever asked him for an autograph, right? And I didn't tell him what to write. I didn't ask him anything. And on his own, he wrote to Top 10 Dictators Forever, Bruce Springsteen. And I just still to this day marvel at how cool that was to say and how much it meant to me at that time. The Dictators never really gave me the feeling this is, at some point, everyone's going to get it and this is really going to work out. I'm going to make a living doing this, and I'm going to be playing rock and roll for the rest of my life like I always wanted to since I saw the Beatles and Ed Sullivan. And he wrote that, and it was the biggest lift I had ever gotten in my life at that point. And that remained. We ended up, when the Dictators were recording our final album of the 70s, Blood Brothers, those guys were next door working on Darkness on the Edge of Town. So I saw them every single day for like 2 months. And so that was when I first got friendly with with all the guys in the band. And that remains to this day. I'm still friends with Gary, I'm still friends with Stevie, I'm friends with Bruce. And in fact, an old friend of mine, Charlie Giordano, got the keyboard gig after Danny passed away. And Clarence was a great friend. Clarence was amazing. Clarence was sort of like this mystical kind of guy, except that he was also about 6'4", 280 pounds. Like, he was a big man. When they call him the big man, they were not kidding. He played out the Baltimore Colts as a linebacker. And a funny anecdote, when we were recording next door to them, Bruce was a total non-drug guy. I don't think he's ever smoked pot. As far as I know, he's never smoked pot. I know he's had some beers and stuff like that, but I don't think he's ever smoked pot. And Clarence would sneak into our studio and, looking for, hey, you guys get a couple of hits for the big man? And sure, of course. Clarence, and he goes, you ain't going to tell Bruce, right? And I go, hey, Clarence, don't worry. We're not the kind of guys that tell on anybody, It's like, and so that's how all that happened. He ended up doing a little guest spot on the album, on the Blood Brothers album. And he added us to the permanent laminated guest list. And we could show up at any Springsteen show in the continental United States and know that we could get in for free. And we took advantage of that a lot. He would just show up, and he would send Terry McGovern, who passed away also, he was an ex-Navy SEAL, like one of the guys that would fish for astronauts out of the water, and he was Bruce Springsteen's like personal assistant, security guy. And Terry would come get us, and we'd go hang out with Bruce before the show, and then he'd come get us right after the show, because Bruce had time to hang out with us before he had to entertain, everybody else that was coming back. And it was amazing. People had no idea who we were. Why are these kids getting invited up to see Bruce Springsteen? He doesn't see anybody before the show. So, we were just different for him.
Wow. And so, you had your run in the Del Lords and made some good records there, and still get to do that today. And then the Del Lords broke up, and you were kind of without a place to go, so to speak, as far as musically. So tell me what happened after that.
Well, that was a really tough time, because I realized all of a sudden that it looks like if I'm going to continue in music, which I wasn't sure that I really was going to do. This was the second time that I wasn't sure. Like after the Dictators sort of broke up, which didn't last long because we were too close. It was a lot easier to stay together than to break up.
Right.
And if I was objectively assessing my qualities as a musician, I thought, well, I'm an okay guitarist, but I'm not great. I can't write songs, that's for sure. I mean, I've been trying during the entire 7 years of the Dictators and unsuccessfully to write anything. And at the same time, I just couldn't see how I could fit into the future, of being a musician. And that finally passed, and I met Manny Coyote, and I was starting to write some songs that I thought were pretty good, and he really liked them. And because there was Manny, I had somebody to encourage me. That evolved into the Del Lords.
Uh-huh.
And so that happened. And then when that broke up, I really wasn't sure what I was going to do. I thought I had written as good a songs as I was ever going to write, and we were still not big enough to, sustain a real decent living. So
Uh-huh.
I really had no idea what I was going to do. I finally decided, well, I got this offer from Razor and Tie Records, this little company that was just starting out in New York, and they had started by selling these records. They had this thing called the 70s Preservation Society. And
Right.
they were licensing all these disco records and selling them like on late night TV as compilations. And that's how they made their money. And then the next thing they did, they started reissuing records by artists that I guess they would have thought of. I would have been in that category. It was people like Johansson,
Sure,
and Graham Parker, and Elliot Murphy, and Joe Grusecki, and that's when they, for some reason, EMI did not want to license the Del Lords records to them. So my lawyer said, you could sign Scott if you want. You could probably do a record with him, and that's how the record with the Skeletons came about.
Uh-huh.
And then it did okay, but the label was still a beginning, fledgling label, and they did not really have enough money to do what needed to be done as far as the music business of the early 90s is concerned.
Right.
And then when that ran its course, I really had no idea what I was going to do. The Dictators were playing again, and that was cool. That was something to do. We were playing quite a bit, and the band had finally gotten really, really good.
Uh-huh.
And I decided I have all these songs sitting around. I think I'm going to take the rest of the money that I have, and I'm going to make the record that I want to make. Because one of the downfalls of making the record with the Skeleton was Razor and Tie did not have enough money to keep them on the road.
Uh-huh.
And not only did I make a record that needed a band, but it needed that band. They were the only band on earth that could really understand what I was doing and execute it. And I was so thrilled to have Donnie playing guitar on a record of mine that I let him play most of the guitar solos.
Uh-huh.
And that would have been fine if they would have been able to pay the Skeletons to remain the band, because I can't execute what Donnie can execute. And if I did nothing but practice guitar for the next 150 years, that would probably remain true, But so the next record, I called it Saving Grace, and I played all the guitars on the record. Just on the philosophy that, well, if I did it once, there's a good chance I can do it again, if I have to reproduce it live.
Right.
And that was what happened. And with that record, it took a while to find the right place for it. I really couldn't bear the idea of working my ass off, putting my heart and soul, my money, my everything into this record just to have it flushed down the toilet by another label.
Sure.
And it wasn't until 2006 when I met this guy, Abe Bradshaw, who had the label 2 minutes, 59-second records. And he was the perfect guy, just the perfect guy who got what I was doing, who had some backing and was willing to make the record successful. And I ended up getting Dion on that record for me, and this was even after I had played with Dion. That was the other thing that happened. I ended up writing songs with Dion for like 6 months. We put together a band with Frank Finero from the Del Lords as a drummer, and my buddy Mike Maceros, who was the bass player in the Smithereens. And we called it Little Kings, and we went around. We played for about 3 or 4 months. And I don't know, Dion, I think, had a different kind of idea of where the music business was at. He thought a lawyer would just be able to get us a record deal, and that proved to be not as easy as he thought it would be. And I ended up being the musical director for him, doing what he calls the Dion thing. I was the lead guitarist, and I did all the arrangements, and I got the band to rehearsal. I sound checked the band. He hated doing sound checks. And through that, he has this new record out there now. He has this duet with Paul Simon called New York Is My Home, which is a song that I co-wrote with him.
Oh, wow.
And that was sort of how I filled time. And the downside of that was after putting out the solo record, the first solo record, the one for Razor and Tie, the one with the Skeletons, I should have continually been doubling down on the idea of Scott Kempner solo artist. But when Dion calls you and he's your childhood hero and he's from your neighborhood, I just forgot everything else.
Right.
And the 4 or 5 years that I was playing with him every day, or in full time, it was time that I was losing to trying to establish myself as a solo artist.
Right.
And things that I should have been invited to participate in, they weren't even thinking of me. I wasn't on their radar. Right. So it really was a double-edged sword. It was exciting. It was flattering. But in the end, it was coming out of the longevity of my career. The idea that I was a solo artist, the idea that I was going to do this stuff and I wasn't going to have a band, or if I had a band, it would be a backing band. And 5 years later, it felt like I was starting all over again. And that was pretty much it. The record Saving Grace came out in 2006, and I did a bunch of shows with that, and it went well. But again, the label ran out of money. Independent labels, it's a tough thing, really tough thing. Yeah. And Abe, despite all his best intentions, was not able to keep the thing going.
Sure.
So then next thing you know, there was this promoter in Spain who his favorite 2 bands in the world were the Del Lords and the Dictators. I was in both of them, And whenever I would go over with the Dictators, which was at least once a year, he would always ask about what's going on, and I would tell him, and he would say, if you could just get Eric at least, and even if you couldn't get Frank and Mary, but if you could get Eric, the 2 singers from the Del Lords, and you could call it the Del Lords. It's not like the band, it's not like the Dictators, where when Andy and I left, it was 2 of the founding members leaving.
Sure.
2 of the 3 founding members leaving.
Right.
But with the Del Lords, that was his rap. So I had this idea, so I called Eric, who I sort of lost. We'd become estranged from each other. I hadn't really seen him very much at all over a bunch of years. I did go see him once when he was playing with Steve Earle, and they played out here. And I decided I would call him and tell him that, hey, Pepe, the promoter in Spain, he's always asking me to come over and play. And, it's like, I don't mind doing the solo thing, but what do you think about the idea of me and you going over there to do it? And Eric was up for it, much to my surprise. Eric was up for it. And as we're talking, he goes, but, we really should at least tell Frank and Manny. And so I'm like, well, sure, no problem. Manny's life had completely changed. He was a lawyer, doing family law, living in Houston. And I hadn't seen Frank in a while. Although Frank played drums for the Dictators for about 4 years. So I saw him for some period of time in the 90s. And Manny, much to Eric and my surprise, was like instantly, I'm in. So it was like, wow, okay. So we should call Frank, So I called Frank. I said, listen, I just want you to know, here's what happened. Pepe has been asking, as you know. to the Del Lords. I know you're busy. Frank was playing with Cracker already at that point. And I said, Frank, you know, you're my guy. If ever I had the opportunity to pick the drummer I want to play with, out of all the drummers in the world, it's always going to be you. But I can make a lot more money if I can call it the Del Lords, even if you're not there. And I can't really afford to not make as much money as I possibly can doing it. And he understood. He goes like, hey, look, I hope it goes great. No problem. I'm not offended. I'm not opposed to it. 24 hours later, I get a phone call from Frank. He goes, no way. No one is sitting in that seat but me. I'm going. I'm there. I'm on. I'm down. No one is sitting behind the drums for the Del Lords. I'm the Del Lords drummer. That's that. And that's really the beginning of how we got back together. Wow. Eric sent me a couple of records that he had produced, and he told me how he had produced them, like in increments, and that he goes, I bet you have a bunch of songs that would probably record well that way. And I said, as a matter of fact, I do. So we made a tentative plan that before we went to Spain, we would try to get some stuff recorded so we would have something new. And that ended up turning into Elvis Club. It morphed from demos into the full-on Elvis Club album. I had around, 15, 18, 20 songs, and we whittled it down, and that was really the rebirth of the Del Lords. Wow. And the big difference this time was we weren't making a new record because it was time, because we had toured for a year, and now it's time for another record. The label needs a new record. We need to have something new out there, blah, blah, blah. We were doing it without any boss, without anyone putting up money for us, therefore making us obligated to them in any way. And we were all together for the first time in 23 years, and the reason we were together was because we wanted to be.
Sure.
And that made all the difference in the world.
Sure.
And having Eric produce it, it could not have been better. It was just perfect. The 80s were a weird time for recording. A lot of these weird reverbs, these gated reverbs on the drums and the guitars. And we had Neil Giraldo producing us. He's one of the best guitar players on the planet. And he was at the mercy of the styles of and the technical stuff of 80s rock recording. Right. And Eric was always frustrated by that. And Eric was always developing his own production philosophy, I guess would be a good way of putting it, of how he thought records should sound, especially guitar records, especially our guitars. And having him produce it, it went by so easily. It was so painless. And it was like I didn't have to, even with Neil, as much as I trusted Neil and still do it, I just came from having breakfast with Neil right when you called, actually. And it was, I didn't have to show up for any, and I knew that if I just left it in Eric's hands, it would end up perfect. Right. And that was really what happened. That was exactly what happened. Eric was the perfect producer for the band. At that point, he had tons and tons of experience, and he had a style all his own, and it worked. Everything just could not have gone smoother.
You guys played last week, right? Are there any plans?
Yeah, first time in a year and a half.
Wow. So what had plans for what else is going on?
All of us, everyone in the band had surgery. Believe it or not. And not even like old guy surgery, more like sports guy surgery. I tore my rotator cuff, and I tore my labrum, which connects the bicep to your shoulder. Eric tripped in his apartment and broke his fibula bone, which is that little bone down by your ankle. Frank had tennis elbow, which it sounds like a rich person's fun disease. They talk about like white collar crime.
Right.
Really, really, really painful.
Oh yeah.
What it actually is your tendon coming loose from the bone.
Right.
And it was brutal. The end of the last tour we did in 2014 was pretty hard. and that was Wally, because he was just doing everything he could to try and compensate.
Right.
And on top of that, our bass player, Steve Almus, he ended up finding out that he had a clogged artery in his heart.
Oh, wow.
So it was like he had to have a stent put in.
Wow.
So, I knew other people that happened to when they were like in their 30s. And rotator cuff, that's like I'm pitching for the Yanks type injury. So it was a really long time off, but we finally were all ready to go, waiting now for our booking agent to rebook the Scandinavian dates that we had to miss. And we also had the, what did we have? Yeah, we got asked. I got asked to do this benefit for this charity that had been set up in Clarence Clemens' name. And ever since, you mention those guys to me, and somebody needs something, and somebody from the East Band's involved, I just say yes. And then I find out what it was I said yes to and hope that it isn't too terrible, because I'm going to do it anyway. So it ended up being good. We ended up adding a second show, and the second show was exponentially better than the first, and just super anxious to get back, because that's our thing. The live thing is where although, now I feel really, I can't wait to do the new record, right? We started the new record, and we got a few songs, have some tracks and some vocals and some guitars on a few songs, and we got a bunch more to do. And we're just sort of waiting for the studios, Eric Studios, relocating, and when they're all set up, we'll finish that record.
Wow.
So yeah, it's been it was, I can't tell you how good it felt to play. It just right, this is what the first show felt like, more like I was learning to ice skate for the first time than I was playing a gig. It was like I know this. I know I've done this before. I'm sure I can do this again. It was really alien and really weird. But we're back.
Well, good.
We're healthy, ready to go.
Well, that's good. I noticed that on your website you wrote some about one of my favorite people and somebody that a lot of people know, Lou Whitney, when he died. Tell me a little bit about what Lou Whitney meant to you.
Oh, well, Lou Whitney, I say the greatest man I've ever known. That's the first thing I can tell you. I met Lou. My great friend Rich Neeson had been not managing. He was road managing and doing sound for Steve Forbert. Steve Forbert first signed with Sire, and at some point they decided they need to find a band, and somebody recommended this band in this town called Springfield in Missouri, and this guy was raving to him about the band. These guys know 300 songs at the drop of a hat. They're amazing, blah, blah, blah. And they went and saw him, and that was how they connected. And when that show, when Steve and the Skeletons played New York, that's when I met Lou. And it was like instant recognition, I mean, he was older than me. He was from a completely different type of upbringing than me, but the kind of guy that if you had met him, I could have met him at any point in my life, and I feel like we would have been best friends.
Right.
He taught me so much about songwriting. He taught me so much about recording. He taught me so much about just life. Lou had that way of giving you life lessons that you didn't realize you were getting because you were laughing too hard.
Right.
And later on you think about it, and, it could be something that would change how you were going to do everything in your life and from then on.
Yeah.
It was never ending, really, with Lou. I mean, the Louisms were way smarter than they had to be, considering how funny they were.
Right.
The sandwich theory, I use that enters my vocabulary a few times a week, every week. The sandwich theory, Lou's sandwich theory?
Yeah. But tell everyone else that does it.
Well,
give us the rundown.
If you go into a deli and you got the money, you want to buy yourself a sandwich, you want that sandwich made exactly the way you want it made. You know, you want this kind of bread, you want ketchup, or you want mustard, or you want mayonnaise, whatever it is. You want this kind of cheese, or you don't want any cheese. You want lettuce and tomato, you don't want whatever it is. You're paying for it. You expect to get it the way you want it. But if you're hungry and somebody gives you a sandwich, that's pretty good too.
Yeah.
And that was it. You know, that was like, yeah. And you know, in life, the sandwich theory didn't. As I lived and breathed, more and more I would find examples of, well, you know, that sandwich theory works for a lot more than actually just sandwiches. And he helped me. Being a songwriter was brand new to me with the Del Lords. Right. The first time I ever really was playing songs that I had written. Right. And I was also a guy that was very idealistic about the idea of a band. You know, to me, solo artists are more, and I have a lot of solo artists that I love, but to me, they're more about me. You know, look at me. Bands are more about the communal, tribal experience, the one for all for one. That's where my heart and soul always is. I've always been a band guy. And I really didn't want to be in a situation where, since I was pretty much the sole writer for the Del Lords, where I would be making 4 times as much as anyone else in the band. I really didn't think, first of all, it wouldn't feel good to me. And second of all, I couldn't imagine how it would feel good to anybody else. And I treasured the Del Lords from day one. And I was willing pretty much to do anything and everything that I could do to keep the band together. And so I asked Lou, how should I do the publishing? What can I do, you know? And he said, well, Top 10, I'm going to tell you right now. And he said, what you should do is you should keep the 50% that goes to the writer because you're the writer, but you should split the publishing half 4 ways. And I thought about it, and that's exactly what I did. You know, that is, we haven't really made enough money for that to pan out into actual dollars and cents that really are meaningful dollars and cents and stuff. Not that they're all not meaningful, but really meaningful. And that is how we still run the band, and that's how I advise other young bands. When people ask me the same questions that I came to Lou and asked him, I tell other bands that it depends what you want. You know, it depends what you want out of your band. It depends what you want out of life. Right. And I said, well, Lou, and then I came back to him a few days later. What about if somebody covers one of our songs? What should I do? And he said, well, there's a good chance that the band's performance of that song has a lot to do with why this person wants to cover the song. So you can do the same thing. And I was like, thank you, Lou. Thank you so much. And that's exactly what we do. And to this day, if we ever hit it big, if some song ever goes through the roof and it becomes a car commercial and it becomes a covers of it and whatever else, then one day we're all going to go to the Cadillac dealership together and each buy our Cadillacs, you know, and that's going to be the greatest day of my life. Like I could do that in return for getting to play with guys so great as Eric Ambel. I mean, Eric Ambel is just a musical hero to me, really. Right. And I mean, I love to play guitar, but on the Del Lords record, I think the last one, I think I took one guitar solo. Because every time Eric would pick up the guitar with an idea, I would go, it's just so fantastic. Why would I even bother? You know, it was like it wasn't the Dictators. There was no chance that I was ever going to play a solo as good as Ross the Boss. So why would I want to stick my ego in there just to get it in there? Right. And that's how. So they get to play with Frank Sinero. They get to play with Eric Ambel. They get to play with Steve Alness. I mean, I just feel like the luckiest guy in the world, you know? Like I can't believe how lucky I got, you know? I'm just so glad I can write songs, because otherwise I'm sure they'd pick me out, you know? They'd have no use for a look like me if I didn't do that. So that's why I take the song so seriously, so I could stay in the band.
Oh, well, I mean, it's just so, it's just so interesting I was lucky enough to kind of meet Lou and get invited into his circle. And then, since his death, I've just noticed that there's just a little bit of kind of, a club, and everybody's got their little handshake or something, because I think everybody, in a way, feels the loss of him and, just wants to remember or, bring his spirit back to us, because, I've certainly noticed that I talk to Roscoe more and, do more stuff I think everybody misses that.
Well, you were at the memorial, right?
Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely.
I mean, I knew that there were a lot of people that loved Lou. I thought there'd probably be 50, 75 people at that thing, and there were 350 people.
Right.
And every one of them that I talked to had their own story about how Lou had changed their life for the better.
Uh-huh.
And the specific data of their story was unique to them. But in the end, everyone had their version of that story.
Right.
And I've never met another person like that. Maybe Bruce Springsteen's friends feel that way about him. He inspires that kind of like, I got an opinion for you. I got a way to help you, and just Lou in this town. That it grew in its mythology to me. Like Springfield, Missouri is like this mythological place. I'm only pretty sure is on the same planet as the rest of this country, and that's because of him. And not really, and then the guys in the band too. Lloyd and Joe Perry and Ronnie, and they're all so close to each other. They really are like this band out of time, band out of place, and they're the best band in America. Except not enough people know that, but that's really how it is. Right. And Lou, it's like the longer I knew him, the more special he became to me, as opposed to less. I never got used to it. I never took it for granted. I never didn't get surprised yet again at this brilliant, hilarious thing that he said. That turns out to be a tip that I can actually use in my actual life.
Well, I definitely think that's a great way to look at it. He was a really special guy. Scott, thank you so much for coming on.
You're very welcome. Thanks for taking the time to hear my crazy story.
Thanks for tuning in. I hope you've enjoyed Scott Kempner, and I hope you'll enjoy upcoming interviews with Deke Dickerson, Soup Granda, and Kinky Friedman. This is the Dale Wiley Show, www.dalewiley.show.net. Please visit the website, buy some books, throw some money. Copyright 2016.